we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Happy 2022, everybody. I'm Andy Hum. Welcome to Gay USA.
I'm Ann Northrup. We haven't moved an inch since the last year. Still staying home and enjoying it.
And we ended the year of 2021 with tremendous losses of LGBTQ activists and allies. So we're going to talk about the legacies of Bishop Desmond Tutu, abortion rights lawyer Sarah Weddington, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, gay icon Betty White, and gay pioneers Tim Maines of Rochester, Jim Toy of Michigan, and Kim, I want to say her name right, Frila of Norway, and more.
I don't know the correct pronunciation of Kim's name, but boy, was I knocked out reading about what she did. Sort of the Harvey Milk, if not more, of Norway.
These are wonderful stories, and we look forward to sharing them with you as much as we loved reading them.
We are not happy to have to share the news that 3 more Black trans women were murdered over the holidays in Houston, Indianapolis, and Pittsburgh.
But Orlando, Florida, is enlisting local businesses and city offices in creating safe spaces for LGBTQ people who are under attack.
And through the heroic efforts of one trans activist, Mariah Lopez in New York, trans people have won the right to dedicated beds in the New York City shelter system.
A South Carolina man is suing to get off the sex offenses registry for having consensual sex with his boyfriend 20 years ago.
This country. In Indiana, the ACLU has won yet another suit by high school students wanting to set up a gay-straight alliance.
And the community is rallying behind transgender activist Gavin Grimm as he recovers from health problems.
Yeah, even as the state is trying to get around, or some local areas around the lawsuit he won. China and Qatar are continuing their government assaults on LGBTQ rights. And of course, since we've been off sort of for the holidays, I have more entertainment to recommend. You probably do too.
Yes. Now we're going to start with a little bit of news before we get to all these remembrances. With some victories to report. In Saratoga Springs, New York, out lesbian Manita Sangvi is the first out gay and the first person of color elected to the town's Commission of Finance for the City Council. She has served on the town's library board and charter revision commission and is a founding member of the town's human rights task force. She's a business professor at Skidmore College, born in Mumbai, and moved to the United States in 2001.
She has a wife and a son, and so she will be the Commissioner of Finance for Saratoga, New York, first woman, person of color, and LGBT council member in Saratoga.
And then in Atlanta, they had already 3 out council members, but now they have a 4th with a sitting council member who's decided to finally come out, Matt Westmoreland, 34 years old. He's a former teacher and school board member. He was inspired to come out by his students, he says, who allow their authentic selves to shine brightly. So I guess he was sort of felt put to shame by them, so he came out.
Well, I wish more people would pay attention in that way to the young people and take those role models for their own behavior. But an older role model was, of course, the great Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Anglican archbishop in South Africa. We have a picture of him here with his very famous quote, "I would refuse to go to a homophobic heaven. No, I would say, sorry, I mean, I would much rather go to the other place."
Well, he was such an inspiration for so long. I mean, of course, everybody knows him as the fierce opponent of apartheid that he was, but he was an equally fierce opponent of anti-LGBTQ discrimination. In fact, he had a lesbian daughter. We have a picture of him with his daughter, I think.
And he attended, but was not allowed to officiate her wedding because the Anglican Church would not allow him to do so at the time. But he showed up. He supported her completely throughout. He absolutely supported same-sex marriage and rights for LGBTQ people. And his talk about "I wouldn't go to a homophobic heaven" was his response to those who said that the Bible was against gay people. And he said, no, absolutely not. And if it were, then I wouldn't go to that heaven.
Well, he spoke about this in a video and for the United Nations, and we're going to share it with you here.
I have to tell you, cannot keep quiet when people are penalized for something about which they can do nothing. First, gender, when women are excluded just simply and solely because they are women. But more perniciously, more ghastly is the fact that people are penalized, killed, all sorts of ghastly things happen to them simply and solely on the basis of their sexual orientation. I oppose such injustice with the same passion that I opposed apartheid.
Why can't we get a pope like that?
Well, he was a great supporter of the Reverend Gene Robinson, the first out gay bishop.
Yes.
In the Episcopal Church in the United States, when people were trying to stop him from being elevated, appointed. And Bishop Robinson on his passing said that Tutu was generous and kind and supported me when I was excluded, identified with the discrimination against me.
Look, I mean, of course, he was also a fierce opponent of apartheid. He won the Nobel Prize for his work in 1984. Yeah. He really taught the world. I mean, now it sounds like, oh my God, how could they do stuff like that? But it wasn't that long ago about the evils of apartheid. He compared it to Nazism in a UN speech. And he really spoke truth to power, confronting Margaret Thatcher about the United Kingdom's accommodation of apartheid and Ronald Reagan. He called he spoke about a rainbow nation, a nation that included everybody, and he confronted his own leaders in South Africa when they finally got rid of apartheid, saying, don't serve yourselves, serve the poor, especially Jacob Zuma, the corrupt former president. And he led that Truth and Reconciliation Commission after the end of apartheid. This was this is sort of unprecedented in human history, where you usually just punish your enemies. He had to sit there chairing this commission. They wanted to get everything out on the table about all the horrible things that the racist regime had done, but they did not resort to just stringing everybody up afterwards. He took on bigoted tyrants like Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, and he stood up to the anti-gay laws in Uganda. So what a loss.
Well, a huge loss of that voice, but a long, immensely important and productive life. He died at 90. We weren't going to have him forever, but we got a lot out of him while he was around.
Long-term cancer survivor.
Yeah. All right. We also want to remember Sarah Weddington, who died. I was surprised she was only 76, but the reason I'm surprised is because she argued the Roe versus Wade case at the Supreme Court when she was the first time when she was 26 years old. It was the first trial she ever argued.
She was fresh out of law school. And of course, she was successful in 1973 in that case. The case was kind of argued twice, and it was a 7-2 decision by the Supreme Court. How much has changed? She was also one of the first women to be elected to the Texas legislature in '72, and she served in the Carter administration. And
we honor her for her support of reproductive rights, which imply privacy rights for all of us. And that case was certainly a foundational case for our victories later in.
And it's all on the chopping block right now.
Exactly. But Roe v. Wade, which may be about to disappear, was based on privacy rights in the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments. You would think it could stand, but don't hold your breath.
And then very, very sorry to read of the passing of Tim Maines. Tim, we're New Yorkers. He was the first openly gay candidate elected to public office in New York State, up in Rochester in 1985. He died on December 30th, suddenly at the age of 73. He's survived by his spouse, David Philip Gardner. He served on the Rochester City Council for 20 years, but he also worked as an educator for 50 years, most recently as the superintendent of the Pine Bush schools up there.
He was a longtime activist on gay and AIDS issues, and he was renowned for his ethics and his high standards and his devotion to doing things the right way. It was very heartwarming to read about his dedication to his students and to the city of Rochester.
He was a very sweet, mild-mannered man, Tim was, upstate. Well, people from upstate aren't like people from downstate.
Let's not engage in overgeneralization.
It's a different ethos, let me just tell you.
Yeah,
unless you're
we don't have time to go into all of that.
As the superintendent of the Pine Bush schools during his second. Oh, I'm sorry. He did serve as superintendent. Now, during his second year of teaching high school social studies in a Rochester suburb in 1971, he invited 5 guest speakers from the Gay Liberation Front because his students, he said it was because his students requested it. It wasn't his idea, but it caused a huge controversy with his employer. And he ended up joining the group himself. He joined others in founding the Gay Alliance of the Genesee Valley, later the president of it. He worked as a journalist at the Empty Closet newspaper up there and helping found the New York State Coalition of Gay Organizations. He was appointed to the county's Human Relations Committee in '77. You know, look, his politics go way back. He worked for Robert Kennedy back in Indiana in 1968, that campaign. But, you know, he only won his first campaign by 11 votes because he was gay and openly gay.
That's all it takes. Yeah. But once again, as always on this show, every week, the theme is the local grassroots activists are the ones who make a huge difference and who are the most uncorrupted and devoted to the cause.
Right. And then there's the loss of former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada, who became a strong proponent of LGBTQ rights.
With a little prodding from LGBT activists.
Well, you know, partly because he was Majority Leader. In 2009, he guided Obamacare through the United States Senate. And in 2010, and we have a video about this, he promised Lieutenant Dan Choi he would lead on getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell by the end of the year. The video, please.
This morning, Dan Choi gave me this to give to you. That's his West Point ring. He says it doesn't mean what it did mean to him anymore.
He earned this ring, and I'm going to give it back to him. I don't need his ring to fulfill the promise that I made to him.
Thank you. When it's signed, Senator, when it's signed.
That's good enough with me. When the bill's signed, I'll keep it safely and give it back to him. Okay? When we get it passed, you'll take it back, right?
I sure will, but I'm going to hold you accountable.
Okay, that's good. So you remember when we made our deal?
We did.
It was August.
I heard you're a man of your word.
Well, we just barely, but it worked out okay.
It's like a knockout in the, is it the 15th?
That's right. So are you going to wear it now from now on? You proud of your ring?
Of course. And knowing that it was in your safekeeping, I'm going to have some stories to tell to my grandkids.
Yeah, it's a beautiful ring. You remember that?
But then on the day that we graduated.
Do you ever think you would get it back?
I didn't know.
Well, this is a very important day for you and our country. And also it brings such dignity, I think, back to West Point, which is a place I've been. It's a wonderful, wonderful place that has such a history to it. And today, not only do we return your ring, but the President signed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
I want to thank you for your leadership and fulfilling your promise. I appreciate real leadership, and I know that it's been a long year, so you deserve the credit for your service. Thank you.
Sweet, very sweet.
Very nice. Harry Reid also got ENDA passed in the Senate when we were still supporting ENDA, which didn't include trans people at the time, but that was the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or public accommodations or housing. But the House wouldn't pass it. So we were still working on the Equality Act. He got a 100% rating from the Human Rights Campaign. He was a supporter of same-sex marriage. And got hate crimes legislation passed and included LGBTQ people in the Violence Against Women Act.
All right, a great fighter. And now we turn to another ally, Betty White. Very much celebrated as a gay icon for her work in show business, which went on forever. But, she was in television forever. In 1954, she was told that she couldn't have Arthur Duncan, a black performer, on her show. And she said, deal with it and give him more airtime. And the show was, of course, they did it, and the show was canceled. And when asked about homophobia, she said, being from a different generation is not an excuse to hate. I don't care who anybody sleeps with, she said in a 2010 interview for Parade. If a couple's been together all that time, and there are gay relationships that are more solid than some heterosexual ones, I think it's fine if they want to get married. I don't know how people can be so anti-something. Mind your own business. Take care of your affairs and don't worry about other people so much.
And they did a number of Golden Girls shows that included same-sex couples, LGBTQ issues, AIDS issues. So always in the midst of that, and we appreciated certainly all their support.
Right. Now, Ann, tell me about Joan Didion.
Well, I've been trying to drum up an actual LGBTQ reference to justify my. Well,
she was a wonderful writer. I just watched the documentary that her nephew Griffin Dunn made. It's a terrific documentary on Netflix, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet. It's been around.
It really is. But she was one of those who I just adored as an independent, no-nonsense female journalist when I was getting out of college and entering the journalism profession. We lost her and Janet Malcolm this year, and I just wanted to quickly read a quote from each of them that has resonated with me my entire adult life, and which I would love to emulate, and I think I do about a halfway job of it. Joan Didion said, My only advantage as a reporter is that I am so physically small, so temperamentally unobtrusive, and so neurotically inarticulate that people tend to forget that my presence runs counter to their best interests. And it always does. That is one last thing to remember. Writers are always selling somebody out. And that kind of courage to me and relentless, ruthless honesty is something that I just am totally amazed by. Janet Malcolm, of course, was famous for saying, every journalist who is not too stupid or full of himself to notice what is going on knows that what he does is morally indefensible. He is a kind of confidence man, preying on people's vanity, ignorance, or loneliness, gaining their trust and betraying them without remorse. Now, those are a couple of tough broads. And Gloria Emerson writing about Vietnam, Charlotte Curtis just puncturing the social cast. All of them were the people I looked to as I was establishing a journalism career. And Joan Didion, you know, she is thought to emulate Hemingway's writing style, and she certainly cited him as an influence. I actually think her sentences, her language is so gorgeous and so precise and so inspiring. You know, there isn't a wasted word and there isn't a cliche in anything she wrote. And to me, that's Henry James, but pick your own version.
She stepped right into the Central Park 5 case. Those 5 boys who were wrongfully convicted of rape in Central Park, and she stepped in while it was happening with looking at askance at what everybody was saying at the time. You know, that these animals, all this kind of stuff. She took a different view and woke people up about it.
She was relentless in her independence and her independent thinking, and I undoubtedly did not agree with everything she wrote, but her style, her affect, her approach was so admirable. And when she died this last month, I found that enormously impactful. I really was.
It was quite wonderful. No one will ever accuse you of being neurotically inarticulate, though.
I don't know. The older I get, I'm losing words here and there.
Me too. That's why I'm so glad I do the show with you, because you can pick it up when I'm.
I don't understand why anybody does a show alone. It's just impossible.
Okay, and then tell me about why we're talking about John Madden, the football great.
Well, my excuse for talking about John Madden is that he was a supporter of Michael Sam when Michael Sam first came out. And he said, look, the only thing that matters is how this guy plays. And Michael Sam was getting a lot of pushback. And there were a lot of people who did not want Michael Sam to be out or play in the NFL. I knew John Madden. I worked with him when I was at CBS at the morning news, because he was broadcasting the NFL for CBS. And because he was doing that, he would do occasional spots on the morning news. You know, they do that to promote the broadcast. So I was his producer for those spots, and I would talk to him every week to figure out what he was going to do that week on the morning news. And he was a wonderful guy who was easy to work with, totally unaffected, very nice guy. And I really was sad to hear that he died. And the documentary about him that just aired on Fox, All Madden, is fantastic and is all about what a great guy he was and what a smart guy, and what, like Joan Didion and Janet Malcolm, not a murderer, but completely free thinker and independent, and had a great value system. And he had a crackerjack wife who you see in that documentary, who's very well worth taking a look at.
Right. And then back in our own community, LGBTQ tourism pioneer Jeff Guarcino of Philadelphia has died at the age of 48 of cancer. He was the president and CEO of Visit Philadelphia and known around the world as an advocate for LGBTQ tourism. He is a co-founder of the Philly chapter of the NLGJA, Journalists Association. In 2017, he wrote The Handbook of LGBT Tourism and Hospitality and a travel column for the Philadelphia Gay News. In 2003, he created a groundbreaking TV campaign, Get Your History Straight and Your Nightlife Gay, featuring a colonial era gay couple.
I remember that campaign, and he made Philadelphia the first city to market to LGBTQ tourists, which was a breakthrough.
Okay.
And then another local hero from Michigan, Jim Toy, who died at 91, a longtime activist. He was an activist at the University of Michigan.
He came out as gay at an anti-war rally in 1970 in Detroit as a member of the Gay Liberation Front, and
co-founder of the local Gay Liberation Front.
Helped establish the Human Sexuality Office at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, which is now the Spectrum Center. In 1972, was part of passing the first gay rights law in the country in Ann Arbor. He co-founded the Ann Arbor Gay Hotline in 72. He worked in AIDS counseling. It was just amazing, and a lifelong activist.
Absolutely. 91 and an activist for all those years, 50 years at least. All right.
And then, Ben McFall has died. He was the heart of the Strand bookstore in New York. The famous Strand bookstore has died at 73, survived by his partner, Jim Burley. He had worked at the Strand since 1978 and had an encyclopedic knowledge of its miles of books, and an earlier love of his, Tim Pollock, died of AIDS in 1985.
And Ann Emmerman.
Yeah, I want to talk about Ann. I knew her pretty well in the Dickens administration, not a lesbian herself, a disability rights activist, and an LGBTQ ally for sure. Died at 84, founded Disabled in Action in New York. She was Mayor Dinkins there, director of the Mayor's Office for Disabilities. So when Mother Teresa wanted to open up a homeless place in the Bronx, in a homeless shelter, Ann said, it's got to have an elevator. It's a new place. It's got to have an elevator. And they said, well, we don't want to pay for an elevator. We will carry the disabled people up the stairs. She says, you might do that where you're from. That is not considered a nice thing to do here. So,
not empowering.
So the plug was pulled on the project. And then eventually the city said, all right, we'll pay for an elevator. But she
goes to the second floor.
Yes.
Yeah, she was a great activist, absolutely great activist. And again, no nonsense type. All these people are people who were independent thinkers, who did not go with the flow, and were important and successful because they were independent thinkers.
Right. All right.
Have we exhausted our list of people we've lost at the moment? Locally, nationally, we have a few more in international news, but let's do some other news before we get there.
Well, we want to talk about some of the Black trans women who've been killed over the holidays. In Pittsburgh, a Black trans woman, Mayara Lay, is that how you say her last name, Ann?
I think so, yes.
Yes, was shot to death on New Year's Day, early 20s, a dancer. She was a coach for the Lady Diamonds dance squad and worked as a youth apprentice at the Legacy Arts Project.
Yeah, and I think she is recorded now as the first murder of a Black trans woman in 2022. The list starts again.
But then
there were a couple more that happened at the end of last year that we heard about late. One of them in Indianapolis, Kiana Stone, age 32, shot dead trying to stop a fight in a nightclub parking lot.
A fight that she wasn't even involved in. She was just trying to be a peacemaker. She was a trans activist. She worked to provide safe spaces for trans people, including inside her own home. She'd been hired at the Trans Solutions Research and Resource Center, 32 years old.
Formerly worked for Amazon as a item picker, but had just gotten this new job at the Trans Solutions Center and was very much looking forward to that, and was regarded as a guardian angel in the community for helping people who were homeless.
And then in Houston, we have essentially the case of an unidentified trans woman killed by a hit and run in North Houston on December 20th, believed to be in her 40s, Black, 5'9", 176 pounds, long brown braids, and a tattoo on the left side of her chest that reads Christian Riaja. That's all we know about this case, so we're trying to identify this woman.
Yes, we're waiting for more details. But a small piece of good news in New York City for homeless trans people. Longtime activist, trans activist Mariah Lopez has been fighting with the city, New York City, for years, and in fact has had a lawsuit for 4 years going on to make the city provide separate housing within shelters or separate shelter areas for homeless trans people, safe spaces for trans people who are not treated well in homeless shelters in general populations. And the city has finally settled this suit with Mariah and agreed to provide separate, safe 30 beds in 4 boroughs of New York City, every place but Staten Island, for homeless trans and gender nonconforming people. Mariah, of course, runs STAR, the Strategic Transgender Alliance for Radical Reform.
Well, she wrote all the legal papers herself. She did this pro se. I mean, eventually in the settlement, the Center for Constitutional Rights helped settle the suit, but it's a tremendous victory. I talk about what one person can do.
And one person who is relentless, and what we know about Mariah. We've known Mariah for years, and she defines relentless. So here is the payoff. When you are relentless, you get something done. And congratulations to her for getting this done. It is it's a small first step. Well, it's a substantial first step. There's a long way to go, but it's great that she could hold the city accountable.
Now we have another horrible murder of an LGBTQ person to report in Bradley, Illinois. A lesbian police officer, Sergeant Marlene Ritmanek, 49 years old, was murdered while trying to apprehend suspects at a Comfort Inn. She died begging for her life. Her police partner, Officer Bailey, is in critical condition. The suspects have been charged with first-degree murder. She is survived by her wife, Lynette Stua.
Now, she and her partner were, they'd, been called to this situation, and they figured out that there was a guy who had missed a couple of court appearances and was therefore a fugitive, had warrants out for his arrest. So they're trying to arrest him, and he ends up killing her. And of course, he tries to flee, and he's arrested in Indiana. His family's been arrested for abetting his attempt to escape. And all he had to do was surrender and be held accountable for missing a couple of court appearances. But no, now she's dead. Her partner is in terrible shape. And the guy ends up being arrested anyway.
Okay. All right. We learned about the status of Gavin Grimm this week. Gavin, we've told you many times, won his lawsuit versus Gloucester County Schools in Virginia and was awarded $1.3 million in attorney's fees. But all that money went to the attorneys, not any for Gavin. So after a personal health crisis that left Gavin unable to walk, They set up a GoFundMe campaign that raised more than almost $60,000 for his basic needs, including housing. In May, Gavin was diagnosed with epilepsy and had 3 grand mal seizures and was put on a ventilator and 5 days of medically induced coma. So health has improved, but unable to drive or work. So the funds raised are going to be put in a trust for Gavin, and he will be able to keep his disability benefits. He very much appreciates all the community's support.
Meanwhile, the Hanover, Virginia County School Board is being sued by the ACLU for refusing to go along with the mandate from the courts to acknowledge trans students' rights. In the face of all these court decisions, they're just saying, you know, we're ignoring that. We're doing what we want. We don't want to do this, and so we're not. And so the ACLU is now having to go back to court on behalf of more trans students to reassert the rights that have already been given to them.
Right. In Orlando, this news from one of our viewers, Rich, who is a police officer down there, the city and the police department are providing decals to city facilities, local businesses, and other organizations to post as a symbol of safety for victims of anti-LGBTQ crime. If you see one of these signs and you go into one of these places, the police will promptly be called. Kiara St. James was advocating for this on our show last week. And the police department has also appointed an LGBTQ liaison officer to work with victims.
Well, I don't want to throw too much cold water on this, but there's a new report out of California. They looked at 3 million stops of people by 18 law enforcement agencies in 2020 and found that both Black and trans people were disproportionately targeted by the law enforcement agencies for stops.
Staying in California, more bad news. The bill to ban medically unnecessary surgeries on intersex people has been shelved once again. Intersex children. It's died in committee. The practice has been condemned by the Human Rights Watch and by the World Health Organization as akin to torture. And all the bill would do is delay surgery until the child is at least 12 years old and can make up their own mind. But the California Medical Association lobbied against it successfully. The only countries that ban this are Germany, Colombia, and Malta. No state in the United States restricts the practice of performing these surgeries on babies.
Terrible. All right, a couple more California stories. First, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has left in place the order to release the videotapes of the Prop 8 trial from years ago. The right wing had asked for an en banc full hearing by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on a lower court or a smaller version of the Court of Appeals decision, and the full court said, forget it. These should be released. Now the right wing is going to appeal this to the Supreme Court. We'll see. I can't imagine that even this Supreme Court would refuse to let those tapes be revealed. But what do I know? They could do anything. And also in California, 2 middle school teachers have been put on leave because they were revealed to have had to have told a teachers conference in sort of joking terms how to get around conservative objections to gay-straight alliances in schools. And the parents who were against them did not appreciate the tone of voice of these teachers, so they're now on leave.
Well, they've also suspended the Gay-Straight Alliance. So that's outrageous. I mean, they've got to be, again, let's get the ACLU involved in that.
And across the country in Tennessee, in Lakeland, Tennessee, where they've been arguing over a gay-straight alliance there, students have agreed to get rid of the name Gay-Straight Alliance and change it to Allies for Diversity after parents and politicians there objected to it. The politicians are saying, now this will open it up to everybody. Well, it was always open to everybody. You're just, you know.
And in Indiana, Pendleton Heights High School, the ACLU won a suit allowing the GSA the rights of other student groups to fundraise, advertise, meet, be listed in the school handbook. The administration who try to block GSAs are in defiance of the federal 1984 Equal Access Act, originally pushed by right-wing Christians to allow Bible study groups. So kids, when they try to stop you, call up the ACLU and they will win your case.
Although evidently there's an age limit on the school club things. It only applies to maybe middle and high schools. So there are some places where middle school is 5th grade, and so that's not included. So it gets complicated. In
this school board down there in Indiana, I mean, over there, the bigoted head of the board says being LGBTQ is a choice and compared LGBTQ people to white supremacists. The opposite approach that Desmond Tutu took. This school board president banned pride flags, and the principal said they make students feel unwelcome. What are you doing to make LGBTQ kids feel welcome?
Well, this is a white supremacist attitude. If you're being supportive of people who aren't them, then you're automatically described as discriminatory.
And in the heart of the Confederacy in South Carolina, an anonymous man who was convicted of sodomy 20 years ago is challenging the state's unconstitutional law requirement that made him register as a sex offender. He and his partner were convicted of consensual sex, and he was denied a professional license because of being placed on the registry. So
I think their convictions have been vacated ever since Lawrence v. Texas.
He's still on the registry.
Still on the registry.
Which is a nightmare.
And in Houston, Texas, back to Houston, a school had banned long hair for boys, anything below about here. And they have had to lift their ban after parents in the ACLU sued there. The ACLU is busy these days. All right. Should we move to international news?
Yes. Let's go to Norway.
When I read about this woman and realized I had not known anything about her, I was astonished. Her name is Kim Friele, or Friele, F-R-I-E-L-E. She's on the left there. She died at 86 in November. We're just catching up with it. That is her wife on the right. This is after they had their partnership ceremony. They're in traditional dress. This is not how they dressed on a daily basis. Actually, the fun thing is that the wife was a conservative legislator, and Kim was certainly not a conservative. And the wife's party, I think, got rid of her after she went public as the wife of Kim.
Her name was Wenche Lauzau, and she predeceased her. They had a 40-year relationship, but Kim came out in 1963. She joined the Norwegian Association of 1948, it was called, in 1963, and she led it, which was sort of the LGBTQ group. She led it from 1961 to 71, and then became the general secretary for another 17 years, leading the fight for decriminalization of homosexuality in 1972. We didn't do it here until 2003, Three. Yeah, and she got us off the index of mental disorders over there in 1977. We did.
She established the partnership law, which led to the precursor to marriage, and she was just a hero in Norway and the most famous activist. And
there's another
so
picture.
Much so that's her in her later years. They held a state funeral for her at the end of last year. That is the prime minister bowing to her casket with a rainbow banner on it. The royal family showed up at the funeral to honor her.
Queen Sonia and Princess Mette Marit, they had, they knew her and honored her. The prime minister in 2008 praised her for making Norway a more decent society.
So she was an enormous figure in Norway, and her loss was felt by the entire country. And I'm sorry we're just hearing about her, but happy that we're able to catch up with her now.
By the way, that Norwegian prime minister said that if the Ukraine is invaded by Russia, we'll join NATO. How do you like that?
Okay. Now, we also lost a Brazilian Olympic diver, out gay Ian Matos, 32 years old, on the left there, died of a lung infection. He said Tom Daley on the right, the famous British diver and husband of Lance Black, was his role model for coming out in 2014. Tom, by the way, has just gotten the Order of the British Empire honor from the British government.
From the Queen for services to diving, LGBTQ rights, and to charity. I gave a very gracious speech that I'll include in our email. Also, two of our allies were made dames, Joanna Lumley and Vanessa Redgrave. Daley said he felt a responsibility to make the whole Commonwealth a better place for LGBTQ people.
Also out of London, the death of April Ashley.
What a story.
Trans woman who had surgery in 1960 in Morocco, outed by a British tabloid a year later in 1961. She had been a very famous and popular model, and her career was destroyed by this outing, and her marriage was annulled. Well,
the thing is, she wanted alimony from the husband who knew that she was transgender.
Right.
And he, he got the thing annulled so that he didn't have to pay her anything, which was an outrage. She was a Navy veteran. She tried to take her life when she was a teenager, but she became an entertainer in Paris, and she became kind of a socialite and knew everybody. She claimed to have slept with everybody too. So a lot
including Omar Sharif.
Yeah, well, that one seems credible. She also said Peter O'Toole. He said, no, we were friends. I don't know. Who knows? I wasn't there. I didn't hold the candle.
She died at 86. She didn't become legal as a woman until the Gender Recognition Act of 2005.
And she was given an Order of the British Empire for services in 2012 for services to transgender equality. Her advice was be beautiful, be kind to yourself and others, and most of all, be brave, chins up.
All right. Well, someone being kind, brave, and with her chin up is the lesbian activist in Hong Kong and pop star Denise Ho. She's been an out activist for like 10 years, but she was arrested by the vicious Chinese government for conspiring to publish seditious materials.
Well, that's an old colonial era law in Hong Kong that they're using against her. Even our Secretary of State, Blinken, objected to this. Ho's arrest is the highest profile yet of these pro-democracy activists. She wants China removed from the Human Rights Council at the UN. China's state media called her Hong Kong poison.
Well, she's been released, so we'll see what happens with her case as she goes along. And in Qatar, the government is confiscating rainbow toys.
Oh my God.
Now, we told you not to take the World Cup to Qatar this year, but you're going to do it anyway. And Qatar is a bad place for many reasons.
These toys are un-Islamic items, they said. It puts the lie to the claims that they will not be anti-LGBT when hosting the World Cup. this year.
Well,
they say they'll allow rainbow flags, but come on.
Well, I'm sure they will. And then everybody will go home and they will continue to persecute their own population.
Right.
That's the way it goes.
And how about the crackdown on Russia? The Supreme Court ordered the closure of the group Memorial International. It's the country's oldest human rights group, founded to document political repression and genocide under Stalin, you know, and the government has called them foreign agents. It's a lot like what is happening here about whitewashing U.S. history. They don't want all the bad stuff from the old days to come up.
I'm surprised they survived this long.
They're appealing to the European Court of Human Rights. The daughter of Natalia Estemirova, a former Memorial board member, was murdered in Chechnya for her human rights work. The daughter wrote in response to this verdict, "My mother used to say, it can't get any worse than this." It turns out, she said, it can.
All right, well, let's hop along because we want to get a little entertainment news in. In Pakistan, transgender activists marched for safety from the government and human rights on Transgender Day. At least they can go out in public and march. I'm not sure they could do that in Russia.
England and Wales have stepped up pardons for people who were convicted of sex crimes, consensual sex crimes. They've expanded it.
They're even going to pardon the dead.
Yes, but only if you've been died within the last year.
Oh, no. Israel is legalizing surrogate parenting for same-sex couples, single men, and trans people. They decided this a while ago in court, but now they're finally putting it into action because the legislature has consistently refused to act on the court mandate.
In Tunisia, 2 men jailed under the gay sex ban after they refused to have their anuses probed for quote-unquote evidence, are appealing to the High Court to strike down the law.
And in Taiwan, a court for the first time is allowing a gay man to adopt his husband's daughter. This was formerly illegal, but another step forward in Taiwan. Of course, as we know, it only applies to this case, not more widely yet.
And Google is threatening to block a YouTube video by a gay Russian living in the United States after it was flagged by Russian censors.
Yes, because Google wants to do business in Russia.
Yeah, but I mean, are they going to come after Gay USA? We do criticize Russia over here.
We're not doing business with Russia.
Well, neither is this guy. He's just putting out videos on his YouTube channel.
No, but Google is. Google is doing business with Russia.
All right. Okay, entertainment.
Yes. All right. I'm recommending Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max, which turned out to be filmed at my alma mater. But strong lesbian storylines, as there are on almost everything these days. And guess who showed up as a guest star on the season 2 of Emily in Paris? Jeremy O. Harris.
Oh.
The slave playwright plays a flamboyant gay man on Emily in Paris.
Okay. Amy Schneider, this is Wednesday, of course. Amy continues to win. She's now up over $900,000, in winnings. She is the most winning woman in the history of the game.
Which is freaking out the right wing. They say, you're taking away the credit from real women. No, we're not. But I'm happy she didn't have that $900,000 on her when she was robbed at gunpoint in Oakland last week, I guess. Phone, credit cards, ID taken, but she says she's fine.
The right wing cannot argue with the fact that she is already 4th on the all-time list of games won behind Ken Jennings, Matamodio.
No, they're not arguing with that. They're saying don't call her a woman and the winningest woman.
Well,
she's brushing it off. I also want to recommend Harlem, a series, sort of the Black Sex in the City on Amazon Prime. First season, 10 episodes. Again, strong lesbian storylines in the midst of it. Very, very enjoyable.
I watched a little bit of Andy Cohen and Anderson Cooper on New Year's Eve, and I say, bring back Kathy Griffin.
Yeah, I think Andy Cohen really embarrassed himself on
drunkenly.
Yeah. I also enjoyed on Netflix Hand of God, the new Sorrentino film, which is very autobiographical. I liked it much better than The Great Beauty, which did he win the Oscar for that, I think? Hand of God, I think, is better. And as I told Andy before we came on air, I'm a new convert to the Great British Baking Show, which couldn't be gayer.
Well, I mean, cooking, baking.
The hosts, the contestants.
They do get a lot of gay contestants. They have had some gay presenters on the program as well.
They have rainbow designs. They have gay jokes throughout.
It's a show that, with all the horrors that are going on in the world, to get into that tent and just see people in a supportive way with each other. They're competing with each other, but
they help each other. They help each other.
So supportive of each other and making wonderful things. It's just a delight. And
it's look, I have a sweet tooth, but I've seen enough on that show. But I, of course, enjoy the British sarcasm and humor and vocabulary and accents. So that's all very entertaining.
I did make English scones or scones. They say it both ways over there on Christmas morning.
I missed that. Sorry.
I'll be happy to make some for you, but they're only really good when they're fresh. You have to come right over.
I'm only a few feet away.
Okay.
But we're happy to be here for 2022. We hope you're doing well, all of you. We
have another minute. We're not even going to talk about the Grindr report. Maybe not. You don't want to talk about that. They surveyed they reported how internationally which countries have the most number of bottoms, tops, and versatile people. And
I'll let you guys look that up. Maybe Andy will put a link in the show note.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting.
I'm going to stick with the Great British Baking Show for the moment.
Okay.
And Harlem and all the other TV. All right. Well, good to see you in the new year, Andy. Good to see all of you. Thank you all for your support. And and if you're not on our mailing list, go to gayusatv.org.
And anytime you have trouble seeing the show on whatever your outlet is, that's where the show is going to be. And it's on YouTube. We have an audio podcast that Bill Ballman puts up there. Our associate producer, and thank you for being with us.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.